Okay, we're in business. We are live. We are back. I'm sorry I'm a bit late. I was rummaging through some old books. In fact, I was rummaging through my 4E books and also the Player's Handbook for 3.5 just because I wanted to make a point. And I don't know necessarily if that's going to be a point that people will like, but I thought I would at least mention it. This is certainly part of an ongoing process where I will talk about the rules, like everybody's been talking about these rules. I am going to put up a poll for those of you who are interested to take part in that, and I'm going to be covering the rules glossary. That is my intention for today, the rules glossary. That's what we're going to cover. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do my presentation, give my opinion, I'm going to do my analysis. And this will be an analysis. I will be analysing things. I won't be just telling you what the differences or changes are. I know a lot of people have been doing that, and I don't really consider that a useful. And I've watched a lot of people's stuff. So, yeah, that's my intention for today. So grab some food, some drink, make sure you are comfortable. There's a lot to talk about, and frankly, I'm surprised at what I've seen. This is not what I was expecting. If anything, I was expecting something else. Okay, all right, so let me just get rid of the earplugs because I won't be needing them, but I will be making sure that I've got everything sorted out. Am I actually focused there? Focused on the shoulders or focused on the eyes? Okay, all right, that'll do. I think we've got it right. So let's head on over to my screens and we'll get started. Okay, how does one start such a large topic? Yeah, it's like that. Here we go. Oh boy. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons because I usually do talk about Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, if I'm not talking about Dungeons and Dragons, you're probably in the wrong place because my channel is called HowtoDandD, which you could term as How to Dungeons and Dragons, or could be How to Death Stars and Droids. I would like that to be the case, but that's not the case. No, today is all about the rules glossary for Unearthed Arcana expert classes. This is 1D&D. This will be an analysis. I'm going to look at everything and break it down and give you my honest opinion about what we're actually dealing with here, how useful this stuff is it any good to you? In fact, are we on the right track? And I think actually we're doing pretty well from what I've seen so far. So I'm going to go through this and give you my honest opinion about everything that I've seen so far. And I think they've done a reasonable job. So I'm going to say that right now. My summary is I'm actually quite impressed. That's saying a lot. So let's start off with the general rules. Ability checks, tools, and skill checks. They function the same under the new rules that they have provided. They played well at the game table, and there's no real reason to alter them as far as I can tell, and I think they have agreed with that, which is great. I'm happy to hear this. This is excellent news. An action is now required when making an ability check unless stated by a specific rule, which will make sense for some tasks but not all tasks. I'm not against this idea. The only problem is when you lock down, you must use your action, and it's only really going to apply in combat. Outside of combat, nobody's going to care. This is going to stop people trying simple tasks. So in other words, if you want to do something very small and minor, it's going to eliminate a lot of that, I think. And a lot of the skill checks in the past were very minor in what they were trying to do. There's also the problem is that it doesn't make sense with some of the tasks that you're trying to perform, and one of them is the knowledge check. Like, who's going to make a knowledge check in the middle of a fight now? Because if it's an action to do, why would you do it? You're probably not going to do it. In fact, the biggest problem with making a tool check, a skill check, or an ability check in a combat, an action, many dungeon masters are going to ignore this, and when they see action required, they're going to make their own adjudication on this. So I don't actually think it's going to be a rule that you can lock down and be sure that people will stick to. So I think they've actually painted themselves into a bit of a hole here. The default DC for an ability check or a skill check is now 15. This makes me very happy. I've been recommending this for some time because a DC 5 and a DC 10, DC 5 is very easy, DC 10 is easy. Why are you even making them roll the dice for that one? Ignore it. So I'm happy to see this. This is a good change. There is no mention of very easy checks necessarily needing to be used. They actually state that it's rarely worth using a DC 5 check. Now, I think that's great. What I would like them to do, I would like the designers to take that concept and say that actually a DC 10 is probably not worth your time either. Like, just to get rid of that as well. Because even though we have that scale there, and I agree, keep the scale, it does help us understand what would be hard, what would be easy, what would be very hard, all that sort of stuff. But you're making a DC 10 check, most characters can perform a DC 10 check, even at level 1. You know, the chances are, the odds are they're going to make it. So why are you bothering? Automatic failure on a 1 and automatic success on a 20 when you do a D20 test has been removed from the game. Now, why? Because public outcry. I imagine a lot of people did not like it. I believe this is a mistake. I think, in fact, that the community are wrong about this and that they have just gotten used to how Dungeons & Dragons 5e works. It actually makes no sense that we apply automatic failure, okay, on a 1 and automatic success when we roll a 20 for a 20-sided dice roll when it's an attack roll. Why are we applying it to an attack roll, yet we're not going to apply it to a saving throw, an ability check, or a skill check? And I've heard the arguments, and all of them are really kind of foolish. They seem to assume that dungeon masters will not roll dice unless the players tell them they can roll dice. It's the other way round. The players don't roll dice unless the dungeon master says they roll the dice. Okay, so if the task is something you can't succeed on, then you wouldn't roll the dice. And if it's something that you can't possibly succeed on, then you would not roll the dice. This issue is not something that you need to worry about. But it's removed from the game, so you don't have to worry about it now. Okay? As expected, and I did say this, the critical role changes that were suggested in the first 1D&D Unearthed Arcana, they have returned to what we had in the Player's Handbook version 2014. So if you look to page 201 of the Player's Handbook, we're not using the new critical role hits that were essentially an experiment on their part. They weren't successful. Nobody really liked them. I didn't expect that there would be that many people who had anything good to say about them. They were never going to be used by dungeon masters anyway. So, yep, they're gone. Now, does that mean they're gone completely? I think they might show up as a variant rule in a Dungeon Master Guide or in another book if we see a book which is full of like variant rules for Dungeons and Dragons 6e, or we can call it 1D&D, but it's 6e. Heroic inspiration is now gained by rolling a 1 on a d20 dice roll rather than the 20 that they had suggested before. Now, I had suggested this as well myself. A lot of people have. And I'm not saying they should do this. I'm just saying it would be good to have that as an option for dungeon masters to use. Just as rolling a 20 would be an option to give out an inspiration if you wanted to. Which means to me, I think what's going on here is I think the designers might be actually forming a list of suggestions for a dungeon master with regard to how they could award inspiration, or in this case, heroic inspiration, because it's not just called inspiration now, it's called heroic inspiration. The new terminology, heroic inspiration, is just to distinguish it from Bardic Inspiration so that people don't get confused, because it was confusing to have Bardic Inspiration and then Standard Inspiration that you could award to anybody. So now they've tried to differentiate that, and I think that's a good thing. I don't have an issue with that at all. Heroic Inspiration Fishing has not been eliminated, so Dungeon Masters will have to be cautious. Again, you will need to use your brain. That doesn't mean that the players can roll a dice for every single thing that they can possibly think of, so that they get a better chance of rolling a 1, so they can then bank a whole lot of inspiration, if you can even bank inspiration, which you can't, or at least get it. Okay? Heroic Inspiration Advantage can be applied after the D20 dice roll, which is nice to see. I'm glad to see that they consider the idea of applying it after the dice roll. We've always done that at my table. It makes a lot of sense. But what happens if we apply disadvantage to our dice roll? What if we have disadvantage already, and then we then have inspiration, we decide we want to use inspiration? Is there going to be a rule saying that you can't apply heroic inspiration if you already have disadvantage, to get rid of the disadvantage? Because if you've already rolled 2 dice and you take the lowest result and then you say, I'm going to use my heroic inspiration, I want to use my heroic, and then I get advantage, that means that's a flat roll. Well, which of the 2 dice do you select? This has been brought up by Trent Monk already and other people. It's nothing new. We all knew this was going to be potentially a problem, and again, it's come up here. Timing a bit around when you apply disadvantage and advantage is very important, and if they don't figure this out, it's going to cause more arguments and problems later on. And let's eliminate that issue if we can. Short swords are now simple weapons rather than a martial weapon, likely to make the short sword available to more classes and to encourage 2-weapon fighting, because 2-weapon fighting has improved in the game. I think it's simplified it, it's certainly made it more powerful, but there's something else I want to talk about with regard to the fact that the short sword is now probably going to wind up being the go-to weapon for almost anybody. 2-weapon fighting, if you're a martial, unless you're using a pole arm or a really big heavy hitter like a 12-sided dice, you're probably going to go for 2-weapon fighting, aren't you? Equipping weapons has been simplified to make drawing and sheathing a weapon multiple times a free action. You can call it a free action, but it's basically part of the attack action. So as far as I can tell, this looks to me like we're eliminating that issue where you would draw your weapon, you would make an attack, and then you would want to draw a different weapon and make a different attack if you had multiple attacks. And that's probably where we were going with this, or you wanted to do other things. I think it would make sense. The other thing that sort of makes me think there's something going on here is, if it's not we still have interactions in the game. As far as the rules compendium appears to still retain interactions. So that doesn't seem to be gone. But I get the distinct feeling that the concept of using something outside of your main actions with regard to drawing a weapon, it's not going to fall into being a bonus action. It actually simplifies things an enormous amount. Because it was always, I can't count the number of times we used to argue about this at the table and try to figure out what we were going to do. So I'm glad. Cool. You can draw a weapon or you can sheath a weapon as part of your attack action. And that's it. Cool. And you can do it more than once. That means you can draw a javelin, throw it. If you've got another attack, you pull out another javelin, throw that. That's how I read it anyway. The light weapon property has simplified. And this is where things get interesting. 2-weapon fighting is no longer going to be a bonus action. It is not. You do not need to use a bonus action with a light weapon for 2-weapon fighting, so you can just make it as part of your normal attack. As long as you have 2 light weapons in both hands. This makes it far more elegant. It's a lot simpler to understand. It also suggests to me that there's potentially a chance that the bonus action might get ditched completely. Now, it certainly makes 2-weapon fighting a lot more powerful. It means that you can use your bonus action for something else if they retain bonus actions, but I think they might get rid of it, which I think would be great. I think that would be awesome. Two-weapon fighting can't be used with an opportunity attack, as it has to be performed on your turn. So the wording does state must be on your turn. So unless your opportunity attack is occurring on your turn, which it's not going to normally, you're never going to be able to use two-weapon fighting as part of an opportunity attack. So don't worry about that. That's not going to come up. Someone is going to suggest that two-weapon fighting will make extra attack feature overpowered, but these people haven't read the rule very carefully. It's not overpowered because you only get one extra attack. Okay, it does not state that if for every single attack that you make, if you have more than one attack, you get to make another attack alongside that. So it's not like if I have extra attack and so I get two normal attacks, that doesn't mean that I get to make two normal attacks with my main hand and two offhand attacks because I'm doing two-weapon fighting and I have two light weapons in my hand. Nothing in the dual wielder feat says anything like that. Nothing in the rules suggests that. I've seen that proposed by some people. I think that's nonsense. It's not going to come up. Maybe people will suggest it, but they have simply misread the rules or misunderstood. Armor training is now the new terminology rather than armor armor proficiency. Now, why have they gone from armor training rather than using armor proficiency? Because you don't actually add your character's proficiency bonus to it. Because you don't actually add your proficiency bonus to your armor class, why would you use the word proficiency? So I think this is good. This reduces confusion and it simplifies things again. They're trying to just make things tidier. Using different modes of movement in the same turn has been very confusing. If you've ever had to try to use different modes of movement in the same turn with a player character or even a monster, it's really hard to get your head around. Those mechanics are super confusing. So if you use part of your movement for flying, climbing, swimming, walking, whatever, it would change everything, particularly if you had a different fly speed compared to your walking speed, or a different swim speed, or a different climb speed. Like, it just made things like very, very difficult. Now you choose one mode of movement on your turn when you take the move, okay? But you can change to a different mode of movement if you take the dash action, or you have multiple or access to multiple movements in the same turn. So that means on your turn, you need to decide whether you're going to fly, climb, swim, or walk. And that's all you get to do with your turn, okay, as part of the movement. To be able to then, if you want to walk and then fly, you would have to walk as your movement and then use your action to dash, and then you can fly. So that actually simplifies things. It does create some odd problems, but I think that's tidier. It removes a lot of confusion from the game. So yes, I think that is definitely an improvement as far as I can see that going to work quite well. I think these are definitely welcome changes to mixing up and using different types of movement, because it was a nightmare in the old rules and it was illogical. Nobody could ever understand why they would consider this a logical progression in any way. Moving through another creature's space now includes a reference to tiny creatures. So you can move through a tiny creature's space. As long as you don't end your turn in their space, you're all good. And I think this is good because tiny actually represents quite a very small bracket, and they take up so little space in a 5-foot square that yes, it definitely makes sense. I'm glad to see that wording included with regard to moving through another creature's space. The dash action has been redefined as another move that you can take. It is not classified as extra movement. This is just semantics, but it does reduce some confusion people experienced. I think the biggest problem that people had with the dash action it was using your action. That wasn't the problem. It's the fact that it said you get extra movement. So they would see their speed. If their speed was 30, they would then multiply their 30 by 2 and say, oh, I get extra movement. So that means I get to move 60 with my dash. So they would wind up moving with their normal move, 30 feet if they had a speed of 30, and then they would dash as their action and try to move another 60 feet. When they were supposed to only move 30 feet. Now, the wording in the rules does sort of indicate that that's just their misunderstanding of how it was structured. They've just redefined it, and I think it's a good improvement. But again, just semantics. It was essentially there to begin with. Jumping as a main action rather than part of movement. Okay, so you're going to use your main action to jump. And the DC is a 10. So it's a static DC to be successful. You can use either it's got to be a strength check using acrobatics or athletics to succeed. All right. I'm very impressed to see that acrobatics has been included. I think this makes sense. I'm not convinced that it needed to have an action to actually perform a jump, because no one is going to use the jump action in a battle. Outside of a battle, it doesn't matter. But in a battle, who is now going to use their action to jump? We're not playing Donkey Kong, so I think that is going to be a bit of a problem. What I would like to see happen with jump is I would like to see the inclusion of not just a strength check, but a dexterity check. Because if you know anything about speed and strength, they all come into play when you're jumping. And I think that if we're going to use acrobatics and athletics, which I think we should include both. And I know that seems like, okay, maybe we're making it much easier to jump. Yes, we are, but it always made sense before. There are a few things that should just include dexterity and strength rather than just one, in my opinion. Okay, a creature can long jump a number of feet equal to the check result. So if you roll up on your check a 12, you get to jump 12 feet as a long jump. And if you're jumping... And it can't be any further. So you can't jump any further than your speed. So no greater than your speed. So if you have a speed of 30 feet, then you can't jump any further than 30 feet, which makes perfect sense. But then again, you're never going to be able to roll that well anyway, I suspect. So, I mean, unless, of course, you've got magic items and a lot of things going on and spells in place, who knows? Maybe it is possible. Now, if you want to do a vertical jump, it's going to be half the distance. So if you roll a 12 on your jump check, then you would halve that 12, it becomes 6, so you can jump vertically 6 feet, which I think is quite a lot, actually. It's certainly simpler compared to what we had before, but it definitely is a lot more powerful. Here's my thing. This kind of sounds like what experienced dungeon masters already adjudicate. The biggest problem I think I have with this rule is if you fail a jump, the creature jumps 5 feet horizontally or vertically. So even if you fail, you get to jump a certain distance. This section I dislike a lot because it offers a consolation prize for failure. And I don't want a consolation prize for my players because they failed a check. And it seems extremely generous to be giving out a vertical jump failure of 5 feet. So we can actually still jump, whether it's horizontally or vertically, we can still go 5 feet up. Most of the time, we're going to probably succeed on that. Even when we fail, when we're going vertically. Probably not horizontally, but vertically. I don't think this isn't going to work. I think there's going to be a problem here. The fly speed changes are more explicit. Now, it's very hard to tell because they've really defined how fly speeds work. It's hard for me to tell right now whether this is a good change or a bad change. I suspect that being more explicit will help some people, but still open up the door for other problems. But I'm unaware of, I just don't see the holes yet. The hide action has a better explanation with, if you want to hide using the hide action, okay, still uses your main action. You need to have heavy obscurity, not light obscurity. I've certainly been saying this. You could use light obscurity. You can't. They've defined it. Heavy obscurity. You need to have 3/4 cover or total cover. They are the requirement. Much cleaner, certainly very well defined. What they've done is they have set a static DC, a DC of 15 to hide with a dexterity stealth check to attempt. This is an attempt to reduce complexity. I don't like the idea of a static check, but it makes no sense, particularly when you're dealing with all the different monsters that are available in your world. Like, is it going to be a DC 15 stealth check to hide from a bartender who's drunk? Or is it going to be, is it literally going to be a DC 15 dexterity check or stealth check to hide from something like a dragon? Like, there's problems with having a static DC of 15. Simple, yes. Trying to be elegant, reduce complexity, I'm all for that, but it doesn't cover all monsters, and it certainly doesn't cover every single situation. And that's going to be the problem here. So guess what people are going to do? They're going to ignore this. Dungeon masters will see this and say, no, I'm not using that. So you've got to be careful about creating rules that nobody will ever use. And this is one that I would ignore, and I suspect most of you will too. If you succeed on your hide action, you gain the new hidden condition. Now, the hidden condition is very, very tight. They've tried to sort of narrow it right down. But here is the problem with hiding, stealth, and the hidden condition. No matter how well defined you make it, it's still going to need refinement. As far as I can tell, it still needs refinement. And some people will need more assistance around this. I think people in the community have always misunderstood how stealth works in the game. Stealth, hiding, being hidden, the concept of being hidden, even though they haven't coined it the hidden condition, has always kind of existed. These things, these aspects of the game, and their interplay with perception, are very complex to adjudicate for a dungeon master, because there are so many factors involved. And with so many different factors involved, you create a lot of headaches for yourself, which means you need to trust your dungeon master that they can make the right decision based on all of the different facts, okay? Designers are chasing what is called the stealth unicorn. What do I mean they are chasing the stealth unicorn, or the hide unicorn, or the hidden unicorn? It's all around sneaking. And that is, unicorn is uncatchable. It is something you cannot achieve. Now, Jeremy Crawford in the past has actually stated, like, there are some rules we can't create and be all-encompassing. And the reason being is you can't create a rule that complicated without it becoming way too complicated. Okay, if it covers everything, if it can deal with all situations and all monsters and everything that you ever come across, it becomes unwieldy. And you're not a computer. The dungeon master is there to try to figure out what makes sense given the circumstances. So I think we need to just fall back onto trusting the dungeon master here. All right. The search action is still a wisdom check. Good to see. But it does suggest some skills to use based on what you're trying to do. And the wisdom checks for searching, they have decided that insight would apply to discerning what a creature's motivations might be or what they're up to. Medicine is for doing some sort of autopsy, I guess you might say, discerning the physical nature of somebody in terms of, what ailments they might have. Perception is your senses. We know what that is. Survival, okay, we're trying to search for something in our environment. Really simple and very clear table. I really like this. I think we needed this a long time ago, and I'm kind of wondering why we didn't, because it doesn't take up that much space. And it isn't actually hamstringing the dungeon master or the players that much. It actually helps a lot. The help action is clearly defined. It separates the ability checks and the attack roll, so they are separated. To assist with an ability check, it must be a skill check. So you can't just make any old ability check. It has to be a specific skill check. And you need to be proficient in the skill. So that means if you're not proficient in that skill, you can't help somebody to do that task. This makes more sense It reduces mechanical exploitation. So anybody who is exploiting the game rules, I'm going to just help everybody with everything. This is what used to happen, right? Dungeon masters then would get annoyed and then stipulate, and this has happened in my game, that you need to be proficient to assist somebody in performing a task, or you need to be proficient in that skill for being able to do that task in some cases. Not all of them, but in many cases. We do this at my table. You probably do this at your table already yourself. Expanding the work together mechanics is highlighted. So now if you're going to work together and use the help action, the task must be productive. Okay, so whatever help you offer is going to have to be productive. It needs to make sense, and it's not always going to be possible. And the example they give is getting two people to thread a needle. Doesn't work. And probably, getting two people to pick a lock, in many cases we would have this crop up in our games. We would say, no, how is two people going to get at that lock? That lock is so small, you're going to get in each other's way. One person makes the check. Now I think Dungeon Masters have probably already suspected for quite some time, and I'm being kind of facetious here, that the design is intended for the help action and working together to only work under certain circumstances, right? They probably already understood that this is what the designer expected to take place, but unfortunately the designer's intent is not the same as the reality for a dungeon master, who probably had more than a few arguments with players trying to explain why they were applying the help action and working together in this way at this particular time. I think you've probably had it yourself. Like, there were arguments about when you could help and when you couldn't. Attack rolls with the help action allow you to pick who gets advantage. This used to be an ongoing problem. It's a very sensible refinement, and it avoids silly arguments created by turn order. When you wanted to actually assist somebody specific, but you couldn't do so unless, of course, you readied an action to help them at the right time to fit in with the turn order. And so now that you can actually stipulate who you're trying to assist in a battle with your attack roll, great. I think that's a good thing. That eliminates a lot of those silly arguments we had in the past. The new influence action is grouping a bunch of charisma ability checks together, such as persuasion, deception, intimidation, and animal handling. Influencing a creature is defined as not being mind control, likely for people trying to use a high dice roll for success. I rolled really high. I am successful. So I think, again, it does point out in the new rules expansion, part of Unearthed Arcana, this playtest material, that a dungeon master determines when you roll dice, okay? And that should always be there. And I'm glad that that wording does exist. So if you're worried about that not being there, there is a sentence that specifies that. So if a dungeon master doesn't think it's possible to do something, you don't roll the dice. And if a dungeon master thinks that you don't need to roll the dice because you would just be successful, you don't roll the dice. Okay, the only time you roll the dice and when it actually matters, which is great. Cool, we've got that sorted out. So you can't kind of exploit the rules that way, right? Cool. Now, many role-playing concepts are tied into this. If you have any understanding of what is in the Dungeon Master Guide for 5e, you will notice a lot of this stuff because they have ported over the concepts that were in the Dungeon Master Guide that weren't spelled out in the Player's Handbook into this. The role-playing aspect, and they have included the table of difficulty class. They've pulled it directly from the Dungeon Master Guide. And this gives you sort of, what you do if they are indifferent, hostile, blah, 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 blah. How can you affect them? What sort of DC would do what? The only problem is that, unfortunately, the DCs provided in this rule set and in the Dungeon Master Guide are very low because a DC 10 is included. Kind of pointless. Like, anybody can succeed on that. It doesn't really make sense. Why are you rolling a dice if you have a DC 10? And a lot of the things are way too easy. Not to mention when you're dealing with a situation when people want to influence each other, influence an NPC or a monster, people try to use the help action. And so, of course, they will have advantage as well. This has been pointed out by other YouTubers. If you hadn't figured it out, this is actually a very clunky mechanic. It's very, very clunky, okay? And it also has, I would say, consistently faulty mechanics. And they are pulled directly from 3.5. If you've ever played 3.5 or 4E, you will notice that a lot of that stuff existed there. And it has been hiding in the Dungeon Master Guide. I know it's there. You may know it's there. And if you were experienced, you would look at that table, and most of the time we would just look at it, and I know I did. And I said, I remember this. I've seen this before. And I ignored it. So does having some DCs and a table help new Dungeon Masters? Yes, it does. But I think you probably need to increase the DCs on some of those checks. And still keep the tables, but also write down that these DCs can be adjusted for circumstances by a Dungeon Master. Because often people get kind of hooked into, you can only do it this way. The key point here is that if you want to use the influence action, which is in fact actually an action now in combat, which I don't really like. I don't really like the idea that you have to use your action to use the influencing effect. Like, that's kind of weird. I always said, okay, you can do that as part of that. I suppose they're trying to reduce the fact that players will want to do too much. So the influence action, you first have to, your requirement is to role play that aspect and play it out before you pick up dice and roll dice. So there's a step-by-step structure to this, okay? You play it out, and then to see the ultimate effect based off what you have said as a player or as a monster, then you roll the dice to see what the effect is. But usually it's going to be the players doing this. It's great for new Dungeon Masters, but if you want to say it's great for role-playing, no, it's not. And it's probably not going to be used by experienced players or people because they will ignore it, or they will simply change the influence action to what they have been using in the past. So I don't think that this does anything for you if you are experienced whatsoever. It will certainly narrow things down. I know there were arguments about, is it an action to use deception, persuasion, intimidation, or animal handling? And so they've tried to hard bake and define it for combat specifically. It's an action. That is just to try to eliminate some of the arguments, I suspect. A Dungeon Master determines when you get advantage and disadvantage applied to these checks for influencing, and they also decide what skill you're going to use. It's a lot simpler, and I think actually they should just take deception, intimidation, and persuasion and just turn them into one skill and call it influence. Do you know what I mean? Your ability to influence somebody by being deceptive, or by being really good at persuading people, or by being intimidating, these are all kind of very, very much the same skill. So I think we could just eliminate those three skills that we use for social interactions, just dispose of it and forget about it. Now, I don't think anybody's going to use this for big bads or major villains. I think most of these mechanics they have presented are really for like shopkeepers and NPCs that don't really matter that much. Yeah. It's given you structure. I don't know that it's going to be enough, though. All right. The new magic action bundles casting a spell using a magic item together, as long as it requires an action. Now, if that means that the magic action is when you cast a spell, and it's when you use a magic item that requires an action, this kind of suggests to me, again, that maybe the bonus action spells might vanish from the game. Now, I know there are already bonus action spells in the playtest, but they're not finalized. I think they may actually get rid of the bonus action. I think they are. This is why two-weapon fighting doesn't have a bonus action to use anymore. I think the bonus action is going the way of the dodo. I would be happy to see that take place. only speculation on my part. Okay, I don't know for sure. Spells that take more than one action require using the magic action each round of casting, and it requires you to concentrate on it. So something like Bless, you would cast it using your action, and then every turn after that, to keep it going, you need to be using your magic action, so you can't do anything else with your action. Now that is probably to stop casters being able to do too many different things. And I like playing spellcasters, but I kind of do understand why they've done this. It actually makes a lot of sense. This stops people casting additional spells while they are concentrating on a single spell during the whole battle. Because what we would do is, if you were a cleric, for example, you would cast something like Bless. And then while you had Bless up, you would concentrate on that, but then you could cast other spells that weren't concentration. And of course, you would really do quite well out of the whole situation. You had lots to do. And if you were, say, a wizard, you would, in using invisibility, you would cast invisibility. It was concentration, but you could still do other things as long as you didn't lose concentration on invisibility. It definitely nerfs the casters, but I think it's a nerf that needed to be there. What I find interesting is, again, it kind of suggests to me that we might not see the bonus action used quite so much. Concentration being broken on a spell still ends the effect, but it doesn't expend a spell slot. So if you cast a spell like Bless or Invisibility and your spell effect is broken, and you didn't end it or it didn't come to its final duration, you don't actually lose the spell slot. Now, that's really, really powerful. Don't expect that to make it to the final publication, as it's far too good to be true. And if they do include it, I think that will cause some problems. The last thing we need is spells that are concentration that you can put up every time you want to put them up. And because what would happen? This means that, one, if your dungeon master, if they're going to try to break your Bless or your invisibility, one, they've stopped the effect during that battle, but you still get to call on it again because you didn't lose the spell slot. You haven't used up that resource. I don't think that's going to hold any water. I think a lot of people will ignore it if they're dungeon masters. I know players will love it. Look, if you're a player, this is something you definitely want. Absolutely. But I think it's way too good to be true. The new study action groups intelligence and knowledge-based skill checks together to simplify the process. And I've had this discussion already with a few people, and I can see, and I don't know that many people have actually mentioned this, dungeon masters are going to ignore the action requirement to do the study, okay? Because one, it's illogical. It does not make sense to have a study action. Why are we doing that? One, it's again to eliminate that argument with the players and the dungeon masters about whether it should be an action or not to use intelligence or knowledge-based skills in the middle of a battle. Outside of a battle, it doesn't matter. But dungeon masters are going to ignore it. Now, there's a reason why they're going to ignore the action requirement and just do their own thing. That is because it's illogical for recalling information. If you're doing a knowledge check, 6 seconds, does it take 6 seconds to recall information and you can't do anything else? It doesn't make any sense. So dungeon masters won't go for that. And it's way too short if you're doing some very in-depth research topics. It wouldn't take you 6 seconds to do this. It's designed to deal with trying to make knowledge checks in a battle, okay? Here's the other problem that I see with it, not just at the dungeon master level. If you are a player, players will never attempt in a combat or a battle to do this. They're not going to take the study action, okay, unless they absolutely have no other choice. They would prefer to make the attack roll or cast a spell. They will do that. They will not take the study action. So you've just created a rule that dungeon masters don't like and players won't like either, and nobody's going to use it. Seriously, that's what they just did. I know what they're trying to do. I know they're trying to get rid of those arguments, but it's not going to work. So now that we've sort of pulled that apart, there is still a very useful table that indicates what skill is involved in a particular area of knowledge or study, and that's fantastic. Should have had that a long time ago. Glad it's there. Good news. Well done, Watsy. You've done a good job there. Blind sight defined clearly what a creature can see, such as, okay, so blind sight, you don't need to have physical sight. So if you have blind sight, you don't need to have physical sight. You don't need to worry about cover. Provided it's not total cover, you don't need to worry about any kind of cover. So half cover and 3 cover doesn't work with you if you've got blind sight. If you're blind, it doesn't affect you because you have blind sight. Okay, don't worry about it. If you're in darkness, doesn't matter. You've got blind sight. If a creature is hidden or invisible, doesn't matter. You have blind sight. It's going to work. A much needed clarification, because the older version assumed the dungeon master would not be arguing with the player about this rule. Essentially, this is what happened, is like there would be arguments. I've seen it before. I've had it at my table. I've seen other dungeon masters having to deal with it with other players when I've played in games with other dungeon masters. It's a topic that used to come up all the time, and nobody would meet in the middle anywhere, and there were so many different disputes about this thing. So now they have really tied it down. Can I just say that I'm glad to see it. Will it solve all the problems? I'm not sure yet. Long rests and the recovery of them. Like what do you recover? You recover everything. You recover everything with a long rest, including all of your hit dice. Thank God for that. It's much simpler, because it always was weird when you were dealing with odd character levels. Because you in the old rules, right, the rules we currently play, but this proposed rule I think is great. If you expend your hit dice, you get them all back after a long rest. Because in the past, right now, you get half of them back. So if you're level 2, you get 1 of your hit dice back if you've spent them. Okay? But if you're level 3, you still only get 1 back. So it means you actually have to take 3 long rests if you spent all 3 of them in your level 3 before you get the whole lot back. Odd levels used to do weird things with how the mechanics worked. So now that they've eliminated that problem, you get them all back. Great. Reducing ability scores are fully recovered. So if your ability scores have been reduced in any way by a monster or an effect or a spell, you fully recover from these when you have a long rest. This strikes me as another power creep mechanic. It isn't really needed. I honestly think that it's only there to reduce the things that you have to track. And I don't think a lot of dungeon masters are going to be very happy about this. I think as it is, we don't have enough effects that come into play for player characters that last long enough as it is. A lot of things are gone after the battle. You know, you either take a short rest or a long rest, or after a round 2 or a minute, it's all gone. Like there are too many things that don't require you to go and do something to eliminate that problem. So I don't think that's going to work, in my opinion. Spells with the ritual casting tag don't need a character to have the ritual casting class feature. So you don't need to have a class that has ritual caster. And you don't need to take the feat to cast these spells now if it's a ritual. Look, this just eliminated an unnecessary feat and an unnecessary class mechanic, in my opinion. I always thought that if you had a spell that was a ritual, that all casters should be able to cast it as a ritual. Thank God we're finally there. Now, provided the character prepares the spell that has the ritual tag, you can cast it as a ritual, which of course will take you 10 minutes plus the spell level. This actually makes rituals far more important than they've ever been before. And it's easier to remember how the ritual works in the first place. Like, the mechanics behind rituals became easier to understand, easier to remember. I like this. This is good change. Teleportation has new wording for people who misunderstood how it was meant to work. Teleportation does not provoke an opportunity attack, and it actually states it in our current rules, and yet people have still not understood this. It does not expend any of your movement. If you take teleportation, it does not expend your movement. That is spelled out. I sometimes I just think that maybe people aren't reading these rules carefully, and they miss some of the sentences or the wording. And that's probably why they've put this in here. Unarmed Strikes. I still do not like Unarmed Strikes in Dungeons & Dragons 1E or 6E or whatever the heck that they're calling it for the Unearthed Arcana. And the reason is Unarmed Strikes are still not considered a finesse attack. If you punch somebody, you kick somebody, you elbow somebody, you knee somebody, it should be classified, in my opinion, as a finesse weapon, finesse attack, just as the short sword is classified as a finesse weapon. Why is it easier to strike with a short sword compared to using your own body? I don't care whether you're a monk or whether you're skilled in unarmed fighting. I have been involved in the martial arts for years. I don't do it now, but I can assure you that dexterity and strength are all part of that, okay? It's kind of ridiculous that we haven't seen unarmed strikes allow us to use dexterity modifier or the strength modifier, whichever is highest when making an unarmed strike. It's ridiculous because based on real-world experience, for those of us who have been involved in martial arts, we know that quicker people can punch and kick us. They do not need to be strong. In fact, being stronger doesn't mean an awful lot if you can't hit the target. And it doesn't mean very much if the other person hits you first in the right place. And there are plenty of soft spots to hit somebody and hurt them. And they don't need to be that strong. I've seen women who have not got a lot of strength and they've beaten the crap out of the guys. So yeah, make unarmed strikes a finesse attack, people. Do that. Wizards of the Coast, you need to do that. We're heading there. Make it happen. You're almost there. Almost. Not quite, but almost. Okay, let's have a look at the conditions. We have a couple of conditions here which I will talk about. Condition changes. The exhausted condition has changed a lot to make it easier to remember by just imposing a penalty to a D20 test or D20 roll of some kind. And those tests are all the same. You know, a D20 test is still an ability check, a skill check, an attack roll, a saving throw. And you are applying this penalty to a D20 test or the spell DC. And it's going to be equal to the exhaustion level. So if you have an exhaustion level of 1, then you have a -1 to your D20 test or a -1 to the spell DC. There are 10 levels of exhaustion, which I think is quite excessive. I don't think there needs to be 10 levels. That's way too many, in my opinion. The real problem with exhaustion, I know a lot of people say, well, this is so much better and everything, but here's the problem with exhaustion. It wasn't that we couldn't remember how exhaustion worked. The real problem with exhaustion is there was never enough mechanics that used exhaustion. There were never enough situations that cropped up or features that used exhaustion. There were never enough spells that imposed exhaustion. There were never enough monsters that imposed exhaustion. It never came up. So dungeon masters had to make up that stuff themselves. That was the real problem with exhaustion. I don't think that this is the wrong way to go, but 10 levels is probably too much, and we probably don't need to just focus on this one aspect. You have to actually make sure the game supports the use of this condition in some way. If it doesn't come up, then we won't use it again. So a character has to have more than 10 levels of exhaustion and then they die. But this is never going to come up. So when is a character ever going to have 10 levels, or more than 10 levels of exhaustion under these new rules? It's never going to happen. Never going to happen. So if it's never going to happen, why do you have it? Okay. All right. I've had my bitch about exhaustion. Some good stuff and also some silly stuff going on here because they kind of missed the point. The grapple condition now uses dexterity or a strength saving throw to escape. And I'm so glad to see this. This makes much more sense. I've already suggested this. So have other people. Finally, we're there. We're just not quite there. We need to make sure that being able to apply a grapple allows you to use dexterity or strength modifier. Okay? Either one. I've seen plenty of people grapple others who are much stronger, and they're just really quick. So yes, get it done, people. Come on, Wizards of the Coast. I think there was something around the incapacitated condition. All I have is I don't know what's going on. There's something going on. I can't figure it out. The hidden condition is new. As I just discussed before, it has a new improved definition, and it grants advantage on initiative. I'm not sure why we needed that change. Does it make sense? Sure, yeah, okay, it could make sense. I just don't know why we needed to have it. Is it because it made sense to give somebody advantage on initiative because they had the hidden condition? Okay, all right. The hidden condition benefits are the same, but what ends the condition or the hidden condition has been itemized quite well, actually. If you make a sound louder than a whisper, you reveal yourself. An enemy finds you. So, in other words, if the enemy walks into you and you're in the same sort of right next to each other, they just found you. You've been found. They walked around the wall that you were hiding behind. You had the hidden condition, but it doesn't matter because they walked around the wall. They knew where you were. Okay, if you make an attack roll, you don't have to hit, you just have to make an attack. Attack roll, you are now ending that condition. You cast a spell with a verbal component. Subtle spell looks a lot more promising now, doesn't it? We kind of had this before, but it's just spelling it out. If you don't have heavy obscurity, okay, so suddenly you lose your heavy obscurity. If you're not behind cover, so that means you need to have half cover or 3/4 cover. Now, here's where I find this might sort of come adrift, and that is there was mention of taking the hide action requiring heavy obscurity, 3/4 cover or total cover, and yet the wording here is just cover. So you probably need to specify that you need to, if we're trying to be consistent, the hidden condition probably needs to specify that you need to have 3/4 cover and total cover. And if you lose your 3/4 cover or total cover and you only have half cover, they see you because they can see half of your body. Okay, much better guidance, but let's get real. The community, the Dungeons and Dragons community, has always been absolutely insane when it comes to adjudicating the hidden concept. Hidden people, they will pull it apart, and it cannot survive because, as I said, you are chasing the hidden, hide, stealth unicorn, the uncatchable mechanic. It's never been able to work in any game that we've ever had for Dungeons and Dragons. Why do we think that we can make it super simple here? It's not going to work, in my opinion. Attack rolls against a creature with a hidden condition have disadvantage. So if you're trying to attack somebody who is hidden, you have disadvantage, which means you can still attack them. But under what circumstances are we allowed to attack them if they are hidden? Because apparently if they're hidden, we wouldn't know they are there. So it's going to cause problems again. Like, is my brain going to explode? Will yours? Hidden and hiding is so complex. I suspect the new condition and the changes will simply, they will attempt to try to simplify the whole concept, but it probably won't achieve that. The only change to the new invisibility condition or invisible condition is that you get advantage on initiative. Straight away I can tell this is not going to be enough to avoid a confusion because people have been arguing about the invisible condition as well for the last 8 years, just as they have been arguing about hiding, and this will not do enough. It's still going to cause problems, unfortunately. Never mind, these things happen. The last thing that I want to mention is spell changes. There are some very good changes to the spells and some things I don't really like, which is why I was looking at some of the older versions of these spells. Bark Skin has a very sensible adjustment. I actually like what they've done with Bark Skin, kind of. It now offers temporary hit points at the start of your turn rather than giving you a strange armor class formula that nobody wanted to use because it was no good. like nobody wanted to use Bark Skin because it just, like, if you had armor already that was better than Bark Skin, why would you use it? And it created all sorts of weird things. Bark Skin has been changed from an action to cast it to a bonus action. Now, I don't think this is going to stay, okay? It would be too effective that at the start of your turn, you get these temporary hit points. It's way too good. Even if it is concentration, it doesn't matter. A bonus action to do that? No, it's going to, I think it's going to have to revert back to being an action. So I expect that this will not get published as being a bonus action. For those of you who are players and are hoping that would happen, no, it's not going to happen. I don't see this. I really don't. I think it's way too good. Dungeon Masters won't let it happen that way. You just wouldn't say yes to this. It would still be better than what we have for Barkskin under 5e. And that's good enough as far as I'm concerned. And it's still useful, even if it was an action to cast it. Okay, the guidance spell has major changes that nerfed this spell. And they needed these changes, I hate to say. I mean, it's one of my favourite spells. In fact, it's probably the best spell in the game because you use it so much. You can't count Wish because nobody ever uses that thing unless you're a high enough level. But Guidance, that's a different thing. You can cast this as a reaction rather than an action, and that means you can use your action for something else. That I'm not going to worry about because it is a cantrip. Let's remember it's a cantrip. So players you don't have to worry about players forgetting, okay? It does stop players forgetting to use it because you are going to react to using it when they fail a check. It only comes into play. You can use your Guidance when they fail an ability or skill check. Now we're going to use Guidance. Which is brilliant. I think that's great. I think that needed to have that change. Guidance can't be spammed anymore, as it can only be used once on the same creature in a 24-hour period. That's right. You can only use this cantrip once on the same creature in a 24-hour period, which means you can use it on all the members of your party, but you can't use it on the same member in your party over and over again. Now, I think that the spamming aspect of it needed to be controlled. Absolutely. It was getting a bit out of hand. No, it wasn't. It was getting a lot out of hand. It was the constant thing, right? Can I cast Guidance on this? Oh, I cast Guidance on you. It used to come up all the time. I don't agree with making this restriction on a cantrip. Firmly for me, I always considered rolling a 4-sided dice for a cantrip with regard to applying this bonus with Guidance way too good. It's way too good. Okay, even with these changes, even with this restriction that you can only use it on the same creature once in a 24-hour period, it's still a really good cantrip, right? I think we need to return to the +1 bonus that 3.5 had. And yes, it will get spammed, but it will have a much smaller effect, and you would only be allowed to use it if somebody fails an ability check or a skill check, and you would use it as a reaction, but you only get a +1. And if the +1 isn't enough to push you over the top, oh well. There are times when even 3.5, and I don't want to go back to 3.5, but I think in this case, Guidance needed to return to the 3.5 rules. Now that is everything that I had to say with regard to these rules. And look, you know, it's my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. I mean, it is all stuff that is playtest. It's not locked down yet, so don't freak out. So please let me know what you think of the new rules glossary, the new rules offered in Unearthed Arcana expert classes for 1D&D. Please let me know what you think. Please ask questions if you have questions. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Now, I've been talking a long time, and I'm going to apologize now because there was a lot of material to go through, and I spoke forever, okay? But Dan is here. How are you, Dan? Dan, I don't know. Oh, look, here we go. Where are we? You have been supporting me for so long, and I know you are a good guy, mate. It is time to make you a moderator. Dan, you are, so let's go through the chat. Let's answer these questions. Let's have a look at people's feedback. And then I want to actually show you some of the older rules from Dungeons & Dragons that we have used in the past to try to explain and support why I think some of the things they have done are not such a great idea. Ultimately, I think they've done a pretty good job. Like, there's still a few things that need to be fixed up, but I think they're doing a pretty good job so far. There's plenty of time to sort this out. If anything is going to be sorted out, it's going to be the basic rules are going to be super tight when they're finished. They're going to look really good. As for the classes, the races, and the backgrounds, maybe not so much. But the basic rules are going to be pretty strong. Okay, do you like the new rules glossary for Unearthed Arcana expert class? 13% said yes. Ooh, there's a lot of people are doing, not a lot of people said yes. Okay, no, 7%. Okay, that's not too bad. Undecided, 80%. Okay, and there's 15 votes. Right, let's go through the chat. Hello, Dan. How are you, Dan? Dan is a patron and has been supporting me for a long time, and is probably my top patron on Patreon. And if you want to support me, that's the best way to do it, is get onto Patreon. There's a lot of stuff there. You like the thumbnail? It's epic. The chess analogy has always come up as something, I know that people talk about it a lot. So for me, I had to use it. And let's get real. If you plant chess pieces in a field, or you mow the ground, or plow the ground, that doesn't mean you necessarily have a really good game system. But it just made me laugh when I saw that. I had to put it up. Hello, OKSDM. I'm going to be doing a Dungeon Master Roundtable today with OKSDM. How's it going, Dennis? Go and check out his channel. He's probably more popular than I am. Yes, he might have fewer subscribers, but more people watch his videos than they watch mine. So you should go and see Dan. Is it bad that they haven't looked at expert classes yet? No, it's not bad that you haven't looked at the expert classes yet. Don't worry about it. Yeah, dividing by... yeah, exactly. Division by 3. No. Walker. So Matt Walker, hello. Welcome back. Hi, Nick. How are you doing? So what do you got here? You've played an arcane trickster using hiding and illusions mostly, and oh boy was it hard to find common ground with the DMs. Yes, it is. Raw need a 4-hour session with a DM just to get them straight. Look, if you've ever been a dungeon master and had to deal with hiding, hidden, stealth, perception, and all its interplay, it's really difficult, okay? And I've had other YouTubers try to get me to talk about this topic, and I refuse to go into detail because what it does is it actually creates more problems than it's worth. I think there's a point where you just need to accept that the Dungeon Master is doing the best they can, because it's not a simple process at all. Shady Daisy. Hello, Shady Daisy. Combined with the new automatic success rules, and you end up with hostile enemies helping you to do silly things. No, you don't, Shady. You simply don't. Because we had them before. We actually had automatic success rules for, would you believe it? Saving throws. That's right. I know, because I looked it up in the 3.5 rules. And we didn't have that before, so why would we have it now? Okay? So it's not a problem. The problem is that people have assumed that just because rolling a 20 on an ability check, a skill check, or a saving throw, getting a 20 shouldn't be automatic success. The thing is, if they did not succeed on a 20, how much higher can they possibly roll on the dice? You shouldn't have let them roll the dice in the first place as a dungeon master. If they can't achieve it, then why are they rolling the dice? Okay, there's the problem. It's not the fact that we're allowing automatic success on a D20 test that has a 20 on it, or requiring a failure. If somebody cannot possibly fail a task because they're so good at it and so well trained, why are you making them roll 20-sided dice? So Shady Daisy, I've had this argument with some very smart people in my own group, and what I've found is they just don't get it. And I don't understand why they don't understand. It does not make any sense. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. If you're rolling the dice and if you can't possibly fail something because you're so good at it, why are you rolling the dice? So a 1 needs to be there as an automatic failure, and the 20 needs to be there as an automatic success, in my opinion. If we're going to do it for attack rolls, we might as well do it for everything else. It's nice and simple. It existed before in the game. It needs to consistently stay in the game as far as I'm concerned. What do you got here, Dan? Not happening at my table. I'm the DM and I'm God over the world. Persuasion can happen, of course, but not... Yeah, even if you're doing persuasion, we're not going to roll dice for every social interaction, okay? You're not going to get to roll the dice for every single interaction. So that doesn't come up. Experienced dungeon masters don't usually get them to roll dice for social interactions anyway. We usually only use it for throwaway NPCs like storekeepers and so forth, where it really doesn't matter, but there's only so much you can do. Do you know what I mean? Okay. Monster reaction tables are useful, but I agree, natural 20 don't hand you the keys to the kingdom. Exactly. No, it's not going to do that. So you might succeed, but there are still going to be limits on what you try to achieve. Do you know what I mean? Even if you roll a 20 and we consider it an automatic success, there will be restrictions on what you can achieve. Okay, Scott. Hello, Scott. How are you doing? Morris B, how are you doing? The Moon Druids unaffected. Moonbeam and Wild Shape. No, I haven't looked at the spells, and I haven't... did I look at the spells? I think I did. I looked at the rules glossary, okay? I didn't look at the feats. I didn't look at the epic boons. That's a lot of material to cover. Hello, how are you doing, Maurice, anyway? And hello, Spirit Wolf. Welcome. I'm behind, and I don't know about the new Unearthed Arcana material. So I come to Fred for the no bullshit breakdown. I am a no bullshit person. You know I am. Dan, you agree, Fred? A cleric in my game got really scared ones and had disadvantage on certain rolls for 4 to 5 weeks in game. Okay, I think this is effects that continue on into the game where you need to go and do something to get rid of that, whatever has happened to them. Disease is a good example. Being poisoned is a good example. A lot of these things need to actually continue in our game, so you have to go and do something about it. Do you know what I mean? 1 hour break time. That's true. Thank you, Spirit Wolf. You're right. I'm well over my 1 hour break time, and I will do that. Scott, good barkskin. Yes, the spell really sucked. It did suck. It was a terrible spell. I look, a lot of things made it to print. Let's get real. I was part of the alpha play test, not just the beta test, and so we can only give so much feedback in the time frame they gave. You know, you can only say so much. Yeah, guidance is a reaction. I actually think it was a smart move. Very, very good idea. Go to bed. Yes, thank you. I'll see you later, Dan. Now, have I addressed the basic issue of if you feel the new rules are dumbed down 5e or not? No, I think... So here's the thing, Seeker. I want the Dungeons & Dragons rules to be as simple and easy to understand. Now, that is viewed by some of my peers, and including some of my friends, and possibly some of you in the chat, as dumbing down the game. Because Dungeons & Dragons traditionally has been played by nerds who like complexity and understand complexity. Whereas I want 5-year-olds to be able to play this game. What I don't want to take away from the game is, even though I want 5-year-olds to be able to understand the game, play the game, I want it to be nice and consistent. I don't want lots of little strange variations in the game or variant situations that don't sort of follow on. I want things to be nice and consistent across the board. so that the kids can play with their parents. As the parents grow up, I want their 5-year-olds to be able to sit down and be able to roll dice and be able to play the game and understand it. Okay? But I also want you, those of you who want just a standard game, I want you to be able to play that standard game as well. So you have some things that would be part of, that you would tack on, and it would become the standard game. And then I want the highly complicated variant rule filled game where people are using opportunity attacks as a variant rule, and we have flanking that we can tack on. We have specialized injuries that consistent injuries that stay in place if you lose an arm because, or you taking exhaustion levels because you fall into 0 hit points. And then when you come back up, I want people to have all that other complexity as well. I want 3 rule systems. I want the really basic one for the 5-year-olds to about 11. And then I want the rule system that goes from 12 years old up to whatever age you want to play the standard game. And then those who are like the super nerds and want all that complexity, then I want them to have a whole bunch of variant rules they can tack on. I don't believe that we are dumbing down the game at all. Okay, I think it's a misunderstanding in what we are trying to achieve. I don't want the game to be just a niche game for nerds. I know I have friends who don't want everybody playing the game, but I don't want that to happen. I want everybody playing the game. That's why I started a channel. That's why I do a live stream explaining how to run the Lost Mine of Phandelver every week. Every week we do a live stream on the Lost Mine of Phandelver for new dungeon masters and new people who are dungeon mastering coming back into the game so they can do this and they'll be successful. That's why we do dungeon master preparation so you can homebrew your own stuff. Okay? Absolutely want that to happen. So I do that. We'll do at least 1 a week. Sometimes we do 2. I'm going to do beginner character creation because I want people to learn how to build characters rather than building optimized characters, because all the other channels are teaching them how to optimize the character. We're just going to learn how to do the basics. I do that. That's deliberately done every week as a live stream. I deliberately go over the game mechanics every week as a live stream. So my goal is, if that means making the rules simpler and people classify that as dumbing it down, then I'm all for it. But I'm looking for 3 rule systems. And one is super simple. One is the standard game. And one is the super complex game, okay, that you put together using variant rules. We were promised this in 5e. We never got it. We need to get it this time round. You need to ask for it, people. You get that game and it will sell. And not only will it sell, it will be a great game. Like, it will be a super, super awesome game. It'll be the kind of game we always needed to have. Do you know what I mean? Because if you look back at history, we used to have... I'm not going to get this break. I can see it now. I've already started on this train. It's not going to happen. So forget about it. I'm not going for a break. I'm a crazy person now. Crazy person. That's... dear. So, let's think about what would happen. In the old version of the game, we had the basic rules, and then we had the advanced rules. So we had 2 game systems. It's time to have 3 game systems. Essentially the same game. So when you play the basic game and you've got that down, then you can go and play the standard game. So as the kids grow up and you're dealing with people who don't like a lot of complexity, they can play the standard game. And if they want even more complexity, they can go and play their own home game with house rules and variant rules. That's what I want. That's what I want. Okay. We are moving in the right direction for something like that. And if we're not, Seeker, I will build it myself. I'm sick and tired of waiting for Wizards of the Coast. So in 2024, if they don't get it done, I'm going to build that rule system. I will strip back their rule system to its bare bones, and I will fix all the character classes myself, and I will release it to patrons, and I will play test it with my group, because my group is ready to do that. I suspect they are. I really do. Okay, Shady, what do you got here? I wish I hadn't commented during the stream, because when I was referring to the automatic success, I was referring to someone responding to a new rule where you talked about it. Oh, sorry. Look, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I want to show you a section in the old 3.5 rulebook, and we'll do that in a second. But let's get through this chat. Now, yeah, you'd be very, you're a bit put off. I've scared you now. Sorry about that, Shady. Hey, so my suggestion to you is, if you're still here, Shady, just be very specific, because it's very hard for me to comment. It did spark discussion, absolutely. But yeah, if we've scared him off, I do apologise. Maurice, you're welcome. The Lost Mine of Fandelva videos. Remember, it's a weekly live stream. We do it every week. Okay, every week it happens. Interesting perspective. Wanting 3 levels of complexity. Yes, I do. That's what I want. 3 levels of the complexity. That's what we were after. That's what we were. That was what we were promised by Mike Mills when 5e came out. I like the idea of being able to teach my young niece and nephew a real basic set for starters. So get them. Yeah, we don't want the kids to be playing a completely different game. We want them using the basic mechanics of ability checks, saving throws, attack rolls, and skill checks. We want the basics there. But a lot of the other stuff we can just put it aside for now. They don't need to worry about those other things. Now, let me go to my webcam, because I want to point out a little section in here, since I found it, that's 3.5. We actually had rules around when you got a 20 on a saving throw. Right down here. Now I'm going to just underline it, and I'm going to read it out. Automatic failure and success. This is under saving throws at the top here. See this? Saving throws under here. Automatic failure and success. A natural 1, the D20 comes up a 1 on a saving throw, is always a failure. We had it in the game, people. It's been there before. Okay? And may cause damage to exposed items. Don't worry about that same section, but it was there. Right, but a natural 20, if that comes up on the D20, that's always a success. So it was there. It got removed when we started playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Now, I don't know, I can't remember if it got removed from Dungeons and Dragons 4e, but it was here. Now, I was trying really hard to try and find the mechanics around this. I was trying to find the ability and skill check, because I was pretty sure that ability checks and skill checks in 3.5 also stated that you got automatic success and failure on them, because it was so simple and it was consistent right across all the 20-sided dice rolls. But I could not find it in the 3.5 book because it's hard to navigate. Pardon me, I'm burping a bit too much. It was hard to navigate, and therefore that created a few problems, right? I was looking through the 4E rulebook, trying desperately to find the same sort of thing, like saving throws. I'm sure saving throws were operating slightly different compared to what we had. So if I can find it, 279. So what they did with saving throws, again, I don't think it was the right choice. I think actually we actually made things more difficult for ourselves. Okay. Now, yes, the mechanics around saving throws was awkward. It was very, very different. So let me just put this here. I found the section in that book for saving throws and how they worked. It was a weird mechanic. Okay, it was not the same as the 3.5. I like the 3.5 way of doing it much more, but let me just show you this, just to indicate to you that we need to return to this system, even though they have pulled it, and there's no guarantee it's coming back, right? Saving throws. Okay. Ending a turn. At the end of your turn, you make a saving throw against each effect on you. that a saving throw ends. Roll a 20-sided dice with one of the following results. If you roll lower than a 10, you fail. So they actually stipulated a different mechanic. And that's because the mechanics for the game was slightly different back then. A 10 or higher, you get success. The effect ends. That's what the 4E rules were around saving throws. Now, I was trying desperately to find how the ability checks worked in this game way back then. And unfortunately, again, I was not able to find exactly what I was after. And I really wish I could. And it would have made my points a lot clearer. If anybody remembers playing 3.5 and how rolling a 1 or a 20 worked in 3.5, but for the life of me, it's been so many years I can't remember. So yeah, let's go back to there. Go back to the chat. Here, I'm also crazy being up this late. Yes, Dan, you are. It's very late where you are. Signing off. Thank you very much. I'll see you later. Yes. Keep rolling those ones. Exactly. Oh dear. So I guess what I would say to you is I think by 2024 that the core rules for Dungeons and Dragons is going to be so tight and so good that we really won't have too much to complain about. And I suspect there will be so many variant rules offered that you will have nothing but good things to say. I think the vast majority of people will be very pleased. I don't know what they're going to do with the classes, but if they can get the core rules sorted out, a lot of it won't matter quite so much. Do you know what I mean? Because I think the problem for Wizards of the Coast has always been that they felt like they had to keep redoing the rules completely to sell the next book. And this is definitely a reimagining of the rules for sure, okay? But they are pulling from older mechanics that already existed and seeing if they're going to work in this current climate. Now, I wonder if I can find an ability check 26. For the life of me, I really wish I could find the how it used to work in 26. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find this. Is there any other questions and feedback people have? You do not have to agree with me. You do not need to agree with me. I totally understand if you don't. For the life of me, it's an attack roll, ability checks, examples, gaining, half level, yeah. Yeah, 4E was a strange animal in terms of how ability checks worked, if I remember right. It was not even remotely funny just how weird it was. And they did not have... I think that's where they first removed the concept of you making a roll and getting a 1 on an ability check or a skill check. The automatic success and failure was taken out in 4E, which a lot of you wouldn't even be aware of, I would imagine, because you didn't play it. I did play it. Yep. It's just the calculation stays the same, but they didn't have that little part of the rule that used to exist. Okay, I can't find it. That is a shame. Never mind. Probably a good time for me to finish up and disappear before I have to go and do other things. For those of you who want to know what's happening in the future, you'll find that in a couple of days I'll be running the Lost Mine of Phandelver again. I think we're up to Wave Echo Cave Part 1. I'll do half of it. That'll be in about 2 or 3 days. Yes, I will be doing the survey for Unearthed Arcana expert classes, but I'm not going to do it until I've had a time to sort of establish my opinion on everything. And I think I need to leave it a little bit longer. And I think a lot of people need time to actually make their own assessment of the rules, because a lot of you probably haven't read them, so you wouldn't know what to say about them. You won't have formed an opinion either. And so I don't think it would make a particularly good live stream to do the survey too soon. So I'm not going to do that next week. But next week, I'm still deciding what I'm going to do. Yeah. So after the Lost One of Fandelver in a couple of days, that live stream for DMs, we're going to be doing 2 Dungeon Master preparations. We're doing skill challenges. I'm going to make a skill challenge with you, so that's something you can use in your game. We're going to do some world building, so we'll build another world. We've done about 2 now, so this will be the 3rd one, I think. I believe so. After that, the next day will be the Cleric beginner character creation, and the day after that will be magic mechanics, how to use magic in Dungeons and Dragons 5e, explanation and demonstration. What do you got here, Seeker? I hope you review more products in the future too. I know it's not your chosen speciality, but a nerd can dream. So Seeker, I will. Now, you just saw me pull up on my live stream the book. So in the future, I will review a lot of the books that I haven't reviewed. But my intention is to do them live. My intention is to do them in 4K. My intention is to record them, and my intention is to be very specific and to the point. And I'm going to do that in the off season. In the off season, I think reviews probably don't get that much traffic. They never make me very much money. So when I do them, I'm going to be flipping through a book, and I will be reading from my notes, and I want you to be able to see everything in the book and get my perspective. So I would expect a lot of reviews to start occurring in December when Wizards of the Coast shuts down and doesn't release any more Unearthed Arcanas. So you'll see a lot of reviews over December, January, and possibly even February, just because that's what I normally do. And while I'm on holiday, I usually sit under a tree and read books, and a lot of them will be Dungeons and Dragons books. So yes, you have not wasted your time supporting me in the way that you have at all. I'm just saving it for the right time. So ability checks, 60. Here we go. This is the 3.5, 65 and 66. I wonder if I can find it. I really want to make my point. 65 and 66. Let's see if I can find this little section. I can't remember if it applied to skill checks and ability checks, but I could swear that it did. But it's hard to find these things. I was looking through it, and if you've ever read any of the stuff on 3.5, the text is really small. There's a lot of really good information in here, but it's really hard to read. And that's a bit of a problem, frankly. Right. I don't think it's here. Which is a shame. Aiding another, individual events, combining skills, skill synergy, ability checks, making those checks. It's just, yeah. If I ever find it, I will mention it. But yeah, I'm pretty sure there was something like this, because we used to have taking 20, taking 10. And the DCs used to be stupidly high, right? Your DCs were just bat crazy nuts. Trying again, opposing checks. I'm probably not going to be able to find it. Skill checks, difficulty class. Oh, here we go. I found it. Here we go. Right, so now you could have a DC of 90 and 3.5. Okay? You could have a DC 90 and 3.5. But I found the section I was looking for. So under skill checks, which was basically an ability check, okay, it says here, you roll a d20 and add your character's skill modifier to that check, okay? The skill modifier incorporates the character's ranks and that skill, blah, 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 because we used to have ranks and penalties and bonuses and all that sort of stuff. Okay, the higher the result, the better. Okay, unlike with attack rolls and saving throws, a natural 20 on a 20-sided dice is not an automatic success, right? And a natural rolled 1 is not an automatic failure. So in 3.5, it only ever applied to saving throws and attack rolls. Now, I would really like to go right back to the origins of the game and see if that was different in, say, the original game of Basic. Like, was rolling a skill check and rolling for an ability check. Was that actually like, automatic success on a 20 and automatic failure on a 1? I suspect it is. I really do. And the section that I can show you, I've got it in the book. This is it. 3.5, Player's Handbook, page 63, and it's right here. So skill checks didn't used to get automatic failure on a 1. Or automatic success on a 20 when you rolled a 20-sided dice. But we used to have DCs of 90. It was nuts. So it's certainly saving throws and attack rolls, but not the skill checks or ability checks in this case. And I think that if we look far enough back, we'll find that they actually that was there. That's Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax included that in the game. And yeah, if I can prove it, I will. Because I'm pretty sure I'm right. Anyway. We have covered this enough, and I'm going to go back to my face, and we're going to sign on out so I can go and do some stuff, and you can do some stuff. I want to thank all of my patrons who support me on Patreon. You can pay as little as $1 a month, and you get everything. Like, there's a lot of Dungeon Master stuff, there's a lot of player stuff there, mostly Dungeon Master stuff, but you get a lot every single week. I also want to thank all of the people who have been watching my live streams, taking part and commenting. Watching replays of my live streams, watching my edited videos, and hey, till next time. Actually, did I want to say that? What I wanted to say is, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, or the wee early morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.